The smell hit first: wet soil, citrus, and something faintly metallic from the watering can. It was a Saturday morning, gray light coming through the kitchen blinds, the kind of light that makes everything feel slower. The philodendron sat by the window, its leaves drooping like it had been holding in a secret too long. I was just trying to repot it. I didn't expect to find something wedged deep beneath the roots, wrapped in a Ziploc bag, pressed against the ceramic curve like it had been buried on purpose. When I pulled it out, dirt crusted the plastic. Inside was a small navy blue notebook, and the handwriting on the first page was hers. Her name was Claire, and for 13 years, she'd been the closest thing I had to home. We met in the spring of 2009 at a volunteer cleanup along the Hudson. She wore mismatched gloves, one green, one yellow, and made a joke about them being symbolic of the environment's confusion. I'd laughed, more at her confidence than the line itself. She was like that, always sure, always ready with a clever quip. I fell hard and fast, the kind of love that rewires you quietly. We bought our house in Westchester 6 years later, the one with the brick chimney and the too small kitchen. She filled it with plants, hanging vines, succulents, that enormous philodendron that practically became her pet. She said caring for them gave her a sense of measurable progress. I thought that was funny, because everything else about her was already so composed. Her career, her routines, her voice. I used to tease her about the journals. There were dozens of them stacked in our study, one for each year of our marriage. She wrote almost every night. I'd see her at the desk, candle burning low, the soft scratch of her pen blending into the hum of the fridge. When I asked what she wrote, she'd smile and say, "Just thoughts. You wouldn't find them interesting." I believed her. That morning, the house was too quiet. She'd gone out early for a wellness workshop in town, something she'd been doing once a month since spring. I'd never thought much of it. Claire liked routines, and I trusted her. So while she was out, I figured I'd finally fix the damn plant she'd been saying was suffocating. I pulled the notebook free and wiped the dirt with a towel. For a few seconds, I just stared at it, wondering if I should put it back. I'm not proud of what I did next, but curiosity has a gravity all its own. I told myself I'd just read a few lines, just to see if it was maybe something medical, a therapist's notes, or something she'd want me to know. The first page started simple enough. March 4th, I keep dreaming about the cabin. It's never the same layout, but the feeling's always identical, peaceful, heavy, and wrong. I wake up missing something I can't name. The handwriting was neat, smaller than I remembered. I flipped through a few more pages. Most were fragmented, snippets of thoughts, errands, reminders. Then, halfway through, the tone shifted. April 17th. I wish I could tell him I feel trapped. But how do you say that without ruining everything? My chest went tight. I stopped breathing for a moment. Him. That could have meant me, could have meant someone else. I kept reading. May 2nd. He still looks at me like he's waiting for me to say something. I can't. I promised myself I'd make it until summer. The rest of that page was scribbled out. The next few entries were about her job, her migraines, her mom's new house in Vermont. But every few pages, something would break through. A shadow beneath the normal. May 27th. The lie is starting to feel normal. Maybe that's worse. June 8th, I saw him again. I told myself it was the last time. I know it's not. I remember standing there by the sink, my fingers smudged with soil, trying to convince myself him still meant me. I told myself she was probably writing about me in a poetic way, like people do when they're journaling. Maybe it was her way of processing old memories. But the pit in my stomach didn't buy it. I didn't know who she saw on June 8th, but she'd been at one of those workshops that day. When Claire came home that afternoon, I was still sitting at the kitchen table. The notebook was in my lap, hidden under the newspaper. She breezed in with the kind of light energy people wear when they've been outside all day. Hair pulled back, cheeks flushed, phone in hand. She kissed my head, said something about hydration breaks and learning about guided breathing. I smiled back like nothing was wrong. That night, I lay next to her while she read a novel about a missing child. She asked if I'd water the plants tomorrow. I said sure. My throat felt like it was closing. The next day, I pretended to forget about the journal. I went to work, answered emails, sat through meetings I don't remember. But by evening, the thought of it gnawed at me so badly that I left my laptop open just to distract myself. When I finally went home, I told her I had to stay late the next few nights for a project audit. It wasn't true. I just needed space to figure out what the hell was going on. By Thursday, I'd read the rest. The earlier entries were from years ago, 2017, 2018. They started out lighthearted. Notes about our honeymoon trip to Oregon, dinners we'd cooked, small frustrations about our mortgage. Then, around mid-2019, there was an abrupt shift in tone. July 13th, 2019, I feel like I'm living beside someone, not with them. Maybe that's what marriage turns into, a kind of polite cohabitation. But then, why do I keep feeling this need to tell him everything? I read that line again and again. Polite cohabitation. It sounded clinical, like she'd already processed the distance, and I hadn't even noticed. But then came the more recent entries, 2023. They were longer, denser, full of guilt and repetition. And then came one dated August 10th, 2 months ago. August 10th, I told him I couldn't keep meeting like this. He said he'd leave her soon, but I don't believe him anymore. Maybe that's for the best. I don't think I'm built for destruction. I stopped cold. Leave her soon? That meant the man she was writing about was married, which meant it wasn't me. My wife had been someone's affair, and she was ending it. The rest of the notebook was mostly blank, except for the final page. It wasn't dated, just a single line written in slightly shakier handwriting. If he ever finds this, please understand, I didn't mean for it to become real. That night, I didn't confront her. I couldn't. Every version of the conversation I rehearsed sounded insane. Hey, honey, why was your secret journal buried in a plant pot, and why are you writing about a married man? I needed proof, something solid, before I accused her of cheating. So instead, I started paying attention. I noted the times she left for her workshops. I noticed how she turned her phone face down whenever she set it on the counter. How she started using Bluetooth earbuds even while folding laundry. One night, she came home late, smelling faintly of cedar and wine. I asked if she'd had a good session. She said, "Yeah, we ended early, but stayed to talk about mindfulness." Then she smiled and went straight to the shower. I sat there on the couch staring at the hallway, listening to the sound of running water, and wondering when exactly our marriage had become a script. A week later, I did something I never thought I would. I followed her. She said she was heading to the wellness center near downtown White Plains. I left 15 minutes after her, taking my old Civic so she wouldn't recognize it. I parked 2 blocks away and waited. She didn't go to the wellness center. She parked near a cafe called The Thicket, a quiet spot near the library. I watched her get out of the car, pull out her phone, and check the time. She didn't go inside. She stood by the sidewalk looking down the street. A few minutes later, a man walked up. Late 30s maybe, dark jacket, beard, the kind of casual confidence that says, "I've done this before." She smiled at him. The smile I hadn't seen in months. He leaned in, kissed her cheek, and they walked toward the alley beside the cafe. I stayed long enough to see them disappear through a side door. I don't remember driving home. I just remember sitting in the driveway for almost an hour, staring at the garage light until it turned itself off. That night, I put the notebook back under the plant. I couldn't bear to destroy it. I wanted her to think her secret was still safe. I needed to see how long she would keep pretending. She came home after midnight, shoes in her hand, hair damp from rain. She looked startled to see me awake on the couch. "Hey," she said softly, "you're still up?" "Yeah. Couldn't sleep." She smiled in that distant way, the way people do when they don't want to be asked questions. Then she walked past me toward the bedroom. I wanted to ask, "Who is he?" I wanted to yell. Instead, I just stared at her back and said, "Did you get to water the philodendron?" She froze for a split second, barely noticeable, then said, "Not yet. I'll do it tomorrow." Then she went to bed. For days after, I functioned like a ghost. I went to work, mowed the lawn, smiled at the neighbors. I even cooked dinner. But inside, everything felt brittle. Like if someone asked me how I was doing, I'd shatter. Then came the night I found the second notebook. It wasn't hidden in a plant this time. It was in her car, under the passenger seat. A smaller one, black cover, elastic strap. This time I didn't hesitate. I opened it right there in the garage, flashlight trembling in my hand. "September 14th, I think I'm done." I told him I can't keep doing this. He cried, but I didn't feel anything. Maybe that's how I know it's over. Maybe that's how I know I've already lost something I can't fix. September 21st, and he called twice today. I didn't answer. I think it's better this way, but I can't look at my husband without feeling like I've brought poison into our house. I kept reading until I reached the last page, and there it was, the same line as before. "If he ever finds this, please understand, I didn't mean for it to become real." That's when I realized she'd hidden the first journal for me to find someday. Not now, not while she was alive and breathing beside me, but one day, maybe after she left, maybe after something irreversible happened. It was her confession, disguised as privacy. That thought wrecked me more than anything she'd written inside it. The next morning, she asked if I could drive her to the hardware store. I said sure. The ride was quiet. She kept fiddling with the hem of her sleeve, eyes distant. I wondered if she knew I knew. At one point, she looked out the window and said, "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" I glanced at her. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "Just like you wake up one day and realize you've been acting for so long you forgot what your real voice sounds like." I didn't answer. I just drove, the hum of the road filling the space between us. When we got home, she kissed my cheek and went inside. I sat in the car another 10 minutes, staring at the front door, wondering if this was what quiet betrayal sounded like. I haven't confronted her yet. I don't know how. I don't even know if I want to. Every time I look at her, I see the woman I married and the stranger who wrote those words sharing the same skin. Part of me wants to forgive her, to believe it was confusion or loneliness. Another part wants to ask who the hell she thought she was writing about. But mostly, I just keep thinking about that last line. "If he ever finds this, please understand, I didn't mean for it to become real." I think about what real means, because it's already too late. It's as real as the dirt under my nails and the silence between us. The next morning I woke up before her. The house was still, the way it gets right before dawn, blue shadows on the walls, the hum of the refrigerator barely audible. Claire slept curled up on her side, her hand tucked under her chin, a faint crease between her eyebrows like she was mid-thought even in her dreams. I sat there for a while just watching her breathe. It wasn't romantic. It was clinical, like I was studying something I used to know. She stirred once and murmured my name, half asleep. I whispered back, told her to keep resting. And as I said it, I realized my voice sounded like hers did lately, measured, distant, polite, like two people doing impressions of a happy marriage. After breakfast, she left early again. Yoga, she said. I didn't argue. I waited until her car was gone, then went straight to her desk in the study. Every drawer, every folder, I opened carefully. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for anymore. Maybe some sign that I'd misunderstood, some thread that led back to me. What I found instead were receipts, a handful of them, folded and tucked under her stationery. Cafe dates, gas stations in towns she had no reason to visit, and one from 2 weeks ago that made my hands go numb. The Birchwood Inn, room 214. I stared at it for a long time. The charge wasn't even disguised. It had her name on it. She hadn't been careless. She'd been indifferent. That's when something shifted in me. The grief stopped swirling and turned into a kind of clarity. I didn't want to just know anymore. I wanted her to know that I knew. That afternoon, I did something small but deliberate. I repotted the philodendron again. Same plant, same window. But this time, I left the notebook out, right there on the table, cleaned off, the dirt wiped away, the Ziploc gone. I placed it beside her mug, open to the last page. Then I went to the living room, turned on the muted TV, and waited. She came home around 6. The sun was low, that amber hour where everything looks gentler than it really is. She walked in humming something, keys jingling, the soft rhythm of a person who thinks their life is intact. Then she saw it. She froze halfway between the counter and the table. Her eyes locked on the notebook. I could see her throat move as she swallowed. She didn't say a word for maybe 10 seconds. Then, quietly, "Where did you find that?" I didn't look at her. In the plant pot. Thought it was strange that a journal needed soil. Her breath hitched, barely, but I caught it. "You read it?" I finally met her eyes. "You left it in the house we share. What did you expect me to do?" She stood there, fingers gripping the back of the chair, shoulders tensed. For a second, she looked like she was about to cry. Then something changed in her face. Her jaw tightened, her voice steadied. "I didn't mean for you to find it," she said. "I know," I said. "That's exactly what you wrote." We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The silence between us felt like a wall. She looked smaller somehow, like someone had drained all the light from her. Finally, she said, "I wasn't trying to hurt you." "Then what were you trying to do, Claire? Because hiding a confession under a houseplant doesn't exactly scream honesty." She looked down at her hands. "It wasn't about you." That line hit me like a punch. I let out a hollow laugh. "Wasn't about me? You were married to me." "I was trying to make sense of what was happening in my head," she said, voice trembling now. "It was over before I even knew how to name it." "So there was someone." She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. When people talk about betrayal, they always describe anger, rage, screaming, broken plates. But what I felt in that moment was the opposite. It was quiet, cold, like my body had decided to shut down every unnecessary emotion just to survive the scene. "Who is he?" I asked. Her lips parted, but she hesitated. "Please, Bal," I said, "don't make me find out another way." After a pause, she whispered, "Ethan." The name meant nothing to me. I searched her face for some sign of regret, but all I saw was exhaustion. "He's married," she added, as if that somehow softened the blow. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "So that's it. You and this guy, what? Fell in love? Slept together between wellness sessions? Was it exciting, Claire?" She flinched. "Don't—" I cut her off. "Because I read those pages. I saw the way you wrote about him. You called him the only person who listened. You made me sound like a stranger in my own marriage." Tears welled in her eyes. "You stopped being here long before he showed up." That one stung worse than anything. because part of me knew she was right. I had been distant for years. Work, deadlines, quiet resentments I never voiced. I thought stability meant success. Maybe she thought silence meant indifference. But still, there were vows. There was choice. She started talking, her words coming out in uneven breaths. It started after my mother's stroke. You remember? I felt like I was disappearing. Ethan was part of the grief group. We just talked at first. I swear, I didn't mean for it to become anything else. You didn't mean for it to become real, I said softly. She froze. Her mouth trembled. You read that line too. I read every line. We stayed like that for a long time. The sun dipped lower, the kitchen went dim, and neither of us moved to turn on the light. Finally, I said, "How long did it go on?" She whispered, "Almost a year." I let that number hang in the air. A year. 12 months of shared lies, whispered texts, and 2 separate lives that somehow fit into one house. She added, "It ended weeks ago. I told him I couldn't keep doing it." Why? Because I saw what it was doing to me, to us. I knew you'd find out eventually. So you buried it in the dirt and called it therapy. Her tears spilled over then, streaking down her cheeks. I didn't know what else to do. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to her footsteps in the hallway above. She stopped outside the living room once, like she was debating saying something, but then turned back. I thought about all the times she'd said she was just tired or needed air. Every memory now had a shadow stitched into it. And yet, even through all that, part of me still wanted to protect her. From me. From what came next. From the version of herself she couldn't control. The next morning, she left early again. But this time, I followed. Not to catch her, but to see if she'd go to him. She drove north, not toward the cafe or the inn, but to a small park near the river. She sat in her car for a while, staring at the water. Then she pulled out her phone, dialed a number, and waited. After a few seconds, she began to cry, shoulders shaking, hand over her mouth. I couldn't hear her, but I could tell by her face that the call wasn't what she wanted. When she hung up, she just sat there for a long time, motionless. Then she started writing in a notebook. Not the same blue one. Another one, smaller, new. I watched from the distance until she finally drove away. That night, she didn't come home until late. I was still awake, sitting by the window. When she walked in, she looked drained. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. She went upstairs, paused at the top step, and said quietly, "I'm sorry, Nathan." It was the first time she'd said my name all week. Then she disappeared into the dark hallway. The following days blurred together. We moved through the house like polite strangers. I started working longer hours. She cooked dinners and left plates covered in foil. We said good night and good morning like punctuation marks. But something strange happened. She didn't run. I half expected her to pack a bag, to vanish, to go find him. But she stayed. And she started doing small, deliberate things, folding my laundry, leaving notes that said, "Coffee's ready," restocking the pantry. It almost looked like atonement, but it wasn't forgiveness. One night I found her sitting in the study again, the candle burning low, pen in hand. I stood at the doorway, watching her write. She looked up, startled. "I thought you stopped journaling," I said. "I started a new one," she replied quietly. "This time it's not about hiding." I didn't ask to see it. I just nodded and walked away. 2 weeks later, the phone rang while I was in the garage. Claire answered it. I heard her voice tremble. "No, please don't call here again." She hung up, pressed her palms to her face, and stood still. When I stepped inside, she jumped. "Who was that?" I asked. She looked at me for a long time before saying, It was him. He's not handling it well. I said nothing. Just watched her breathing unevenly, her shoulders hunched. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. That night, I checked my email before bed. One new message in my inbox. No sender name. Just a random Gmail address. The subject line, "You deserve the truth." I clicked it open. Inside was a single line. Ask her about the lake house. No attachments, no signature, no context. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. We didn't have a lake house. At least, not together. The next morning, I asked her, "What's the lake house?" I said casually while pouring coffee. She froze mid-step. "What?" "You heard me." Her mug trembled in her hand. "Why are you asking that?" "Because someone thinks I should." Her face drained of color. "Who told you that?" "Doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that you clearly know what it means." She sank into the chair slowly, as if her body had given up pretending. "It's nothing," she said finally. "Just a place we used to meet, upstate. I ended it, Nathan. I swear." I set my mug down. "You rented a house for this?" She nodded weakly. "It was his idea. I went twice. Then I couldn't anymore." I stared at her, feeling something twist inside me. Twice was enough. She nodded again. "I know." That night I couldn't stop thinking about the message. Someone had sent it anonymously. Someone who knew. I considered the possibility that it was Ethan's wife. Maybe she'd found out and wanted revenge. Or maybe Ethan himself was unraveling. Either way, the secret wasn't contained anymore. And I realized something terrifying. Once a secret breaks the surface, it doesn't stop spreading. It keeps moving, like water through soil. A few nights later, I woke to a sound. A phone vibrating. It wasn't mine. It was hers, on the nightstand. I saw the screen light up. Unknown caller. I waited. It buzzed again. She stirred, reached for it, then froze when she saw I was awake. "Who is it?" I asked. She whispered, "I don't know." I watched her decline the call, but the tremor in her hand told me she did know. And I realized right then, whatever this thing was between her and Ethan, it wasn't over, not really. It had just gone underground. The next morning she left early. I didn't follow this time. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the philodendron, the same one that had held her secret once. Its leaves were starting to yellow again. I should have watered it. I didn't. By noon, she still wasn't back. I called her. No answer. I texted. Nothing. By 4 o'clock, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You should come get her." Attached was a photo. Claire's car, parked near a lake, and in the background, a small cabin. I drove without thinking. The road curved through endless trees, gray sky pressing down like a lid. When I finally reached the spot, her car was there. Empty. The lake was still, silver in the fading light. Then I saw movement near the cabin, a figure in a dark jacket. A man, and beside him, Claire. I didn't get out right away. I watched from the car, heart pounding so hard it hurt. They were standing close, talking. She looked upset. He reached for her arm. She pulled back. I couldn't hear them, but her body language said everything. Then she turned away, started walking toward the lake. He followed. The gravel cracked under my tires as I pulled off the road, just far enough that the car wouldn't be seen from the clearing. The air smelled of pine and cold water, and there was this eerie, layered quiet, the kind you only hear near a lake, where sound moves differently. I killed the engine, and the silence that followed was deafening. Through the windshield, I could see them. 2 silhouettes framed against the fading light, the ripples of the lake catching at their feet. She stood stiff, arms wrapped around herself, the breeze tugging strands of her hair. He was facing her, taller, gesturing sharply as he spoke. My first instinct was to rush out there, to break whatever moment this was, but I didn't. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my hands hurt. Watching, trying to read her body language like a language I used to know, but forgot somewhere along the years. And in those few seconds, I realized something cruel. She didn't look like my wife anymore. She looked like someone cornered between guilt and grief. I finally stepped out. The door shut with a dull thud that made both of them turn. Claire's eyes widened. Fear, recognition, disbelief, all flickering at once. Ethan's face went blank, as if he'd been caught in the middle of a confession. "Nathan, what are you doing here?" she said, her voice thin. I held up my phone. "You tell me. Someone sent me a picture of your car, said I should come get you." She looked genuinely confused. "What? Who would—" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe your friend here can answer that." Ethan stepped forward slightly, trying for calm authority. "Look, man." "Don't," I cut him off. "You don't get to talk to me like you're the sane one here." He stopped, hands raised slightly in that practiced, disarming way of men who are used to navigating fallout. I'd seen that look before at work, in boardrooms where people tried to control narratives. "I didn't want it to go this far," he said. "She ended it. I respected that." "Yeah?" I said, because following her to a lake house and calling her in the middle of the night screams respect. Claire stepped between us, palms up. "Stop it, both of you, please." The wind cut through her words, scattering them. For a moment, no one said anything. The lake behind us moved softly, the water making that faint, repetitive sound against the dock. Somewhere far off, a bird cried out once, then stopped. Finally, I said quietly, "I just want to know one thing. Why here?" Claire turned, looking out toward the cabin. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Because it's where I first told him it was over. I thought if I came back, maybe I could close it for good." I stared at her. "By meeting him again?" "He wouldn't stop calling," she said. "I thought if I faced him, he'd finally let me go." Ethan exhaled sharply, looking away. "I didn't force you to come here, Claire." Her voice rose, trembling. "You didn't have to. You made it sound like it was my fault that everything fell apart." The two of them kept talking, but the words blurred together for me. I stepped back, my boots sinking slightly into the damp soil, and for a second, I felt something give inside me, a mix of disbelief and a tired kind of surrender. When you spend years with someone, you build this private world together, tiny rituals, shorthand phrases, little moments that only make sense between the two of you. I'd believed ours was still standing, even if it was cracked. But watching her now, I saw her speak to him with a familiarity that came from shared secrets, not love. And that's what broke me more than anything. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the realization that the version of me she'd been living beside was no longer the one inside her head. At some point, Ethan started walking toward the cabin, muttering something about needing space. Claire didn't stop him. She just stood there, staring at the lake, her eyes glistening. "Are you coming?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "No, I just need a minute." So I let her have it. I went back to the car and waited, window cracked, fingers tapping the steering wheel. Minutes stretched into almost an hour. Dusk turned into night. The cabin light flickered on at one point, then nothing. Finally, I got out again. The air had that damp, electric feel right before rain. I walked toward the lake, my flashlight cutting a thin beam through the dark. She wasn't there anymore. I called her name. No answer. The cabin door was slightly open. Inside, it smelled of mildew and wood smoke. Old coffee mugs, a blanket thrown over a chair. On the table sat a phone, face down. Her phone. My pulse started to pound. "Claire?" I called again, louder this time. Then I heard it, the faint sound of something splashing near the dock. I ran. When I reached the water, the beam of my flashlight caught movement, her figure knee-deep in the lake, her dress soaked, her arms wrapped around herself. "Claire!" I shouted. She turned, blinking against the light. Her face was wet, but not from the lake. "I'm fine," she said, her voice cracking. "I just needed to feel something real." I waded in, water soaking through my jeans. "You don't have to do this." She shook her head. "You think I'm trying to hurt myself? I'm not. I just—" She broke off, sobbing. "Everything's been so loud inside my head, I don't know who I am anymore." I didn't know what to say. I just reached out, took her hand, and pulled her back toward the shore. When we reached dry ground, she sank down onto the dirt, shaking. I gave her my jacket. We sat there in silence for a long time. The light from the cabin flickered across the water, and in it, I could see the outline of Ethan standing in the doorway, watching. He didn't move. Neither did I. After a while, he turned and disappeared inside. "Do you love him?" I asked quietly. She didn't look up. "I thought I did." "And now?" She hesitated. "Now I don't even trust what love means anymore." I wanted to hate her. I really did. But sitting there, hearing her voice so small and broken, I couldn't find clean anger, just this dull ache. Because she wasn't the same person who'd written those journals, and I wasn't the same man she'd betrayed. We were both standing in the wreckage of people who used to exist. We drove home in silence. She kept her head turned toward the window the whole ride, fingers clutching the edges of my jacket. When we pulled into the driveway, she whispered, "Thank you for coming." I didn't answer. I just nodded once and got out. Inside, the house smelled the same: coffee grounds, lavender detergent, the faint earthiness of the plants by the window. But it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum of what used to be ours. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. She stopped going to her classes, stopped journaling, or maybe she started hiding it better. We didn't fight. We didn't cry. We just drifted around each other like polite ghosts until the letter arrived. It came in a plain envelope with no return address. My name on the front, written in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single page. "You don't know the full story. Ask her about June 3rd. That was it. No signature, no explanation. I stared at the note for a long time. Then I went upstairs. She was in the bedroom folding laundry. "What happened on June 3rd? I asked. Her hands froze. A pair of socks slipped from her fingers. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said carefully. "You sure? Someone thinks you do." She looked up, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Nathan, please, let it go." "Let it go? After everything?" I held up the note. "Who keeps sending me this crap, Claire? Because whoever it is seems to know exactly which nerve to hit." She sank down on the edge of the bed, face pale. June 3rd was the day I told him I couldn't keep the pregnancy. The words landed like a hammer. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. "What?" She looked up, tears brimming. "I was late. I didn't know whose it was. I panicked. It ended on its own, but I never told you because I couldn't even process it myself." I stepped back, the air gone from the room. "You were pregnant?" She nodded, whispering, "Yes." "With his?" "I don't know," she said, voice breaking. "It could have been yours, but after everything, I couldn't live with that uncertainty. I wanted to forget it ever happened." I sat down hard in the chair by the dresser. My head was spinning, my pulse too loud in my ears. "I would have stood by you," I said. "I know," she whispered. "That's why I couldn't tell you. Because you would have stayed, and I would have ruined you too." For the first time, I saw the full weight of her guilt, not just for the affair, but for everything that came after. And yet, it didn't make it any easier to breathe. That night I went for a drive. I don't remember where, just that the road lights blurred into long streaks, and I kept replaying her words in my head. I didn't mean for it to become real. When I got back, she was asleep on the couch, her journal on the coffee table beside her. Not hidden this time. I should have left it alone. But I didn't. Inside, the entries were shorter, fragmented. October 3rd, he won't stop calling. I keep deleting the messages, but they always come back. I think he's unraveling. October 5th, Nathan looked at me differently today. I think he knows more than he says. I don't know if that's better or worse. October 7th, I can't fix what I broke, but I can at least tell the truth before it finds him another way. The next page was blank except for one line written in pen so faint it was almost invisible. If something happens to me, check the phone. The next morning, her phone was gone. I checked the kitchen, the car, every counter, nothing. "Claire," I called. No answer. Her purse was by the door, keys still inside, but her shoes were gone. Then I saw the note on the counter. "I need to finish this. Please don't follow me." I didn't listen. I drove straight back toward the lake. Halfway there, rain started, slow at first, then heavy enough to blur the windshield. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number. I answered. Nothing but breathing on the other end. "Who is this?" I said. Then a voice, low and broken. "You should have let her go." Click. The line went dead. By the time I reached the lake, night had fallen. Her car was there again, parked in the same spot. The cabin was dark this time. No light, no sound. I got out, rain soaking through my jacket. "Claire!" I shouted. No answer. I moved toward the dock, flashlight trembling in my hand. The water looked black, endless. Then I saw something at the edge of the dock. Her phone, screen cracked, rain pooling on it, and next to it, a single page torn from her journal. The ink was smudged, but one line was still legible. "Tell him I finally understand what real means." I shouted her name until my throat burned. Somewhere across the lake, thunder rolled, but no one answered. The search started at dawn. Police, divers, volunteers. They found her car, her bag, her shoes, but not her. For 3 days, the lake gave nothing back. Until the morning of the 4th, when a fisherman found her a mile downstream, caught in the reeds. They said it was an accident, that she slipped, maybe fainted. But when they handed me her journal, what was left of it? The last page told a different story. The last words she'd ever written were shaky but clear. "If he ever finds this, please understand, I didn't mean for it to become real." I read that line again at her funeral, standing by the casket, the same way I had the first time I'd found it. And for the first time, I understood what she meant. Because love, guilt, truth, they all become real the moment you stop pretending they aren't. And by then, it's already too late. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. After the funeral, people kept saying things like, "She's in a better place," or "At least you got closure." I nodded, because that's what you're supposed to do when people don't know what to say. But there was no closure. Just 1,000 questions circling the same point. Why now? Why there? The police called it an accident. The medical report said she'd fallen, possibly lost consciousness. But the note she left, smudged, trembling, didn't sound accidental. And that sentence, "Tell him I finally understand what real means." It was like a message written both to me and someone else. A week after the funeral, I found myself in the study again. Her candle was still on the desk, wax melted into a frozen pool. I hadn't touched anything since that night she'd written last. The air smelled faintly of smoke, and her perfume, the kind she always wore when she wanted to feel composed. I sat in her chair and opened the drawer. Inside were fragments of her life reduced to paper, receipts, a half-written grocery list, a prescription bottle. But beneath those, tucked between two envelopes, was a flash drive. It had a strip of masking tape on it, written in her handwriting, "If you're ready." I stared at it for nearly 10 minutes before plugging it into my laptop. A folder popped open. No documents, no spreadsheets, just a single audio file named June 3rd MP3, the same date from that anonymous letter. When I pressed play, the sound that filled the room wasn't what I expected. It wasn't her voice. It was a recording of a conversation, faint, muffled, maybe from a phone hidden in a pocket. Claire's voice came first, shaky. "I can't keep doing this, Ethan. It's tearing me apart." Then his, "You said you loved me. You don't just erase that. It's not love if it destroys everything else." There was a pause, then the sound of something slamming. A door, maybe a wall. Ethan's voice rose, angrier now. "You can't just walk away. You think your husband won't find out? You think I'll keep your secrets forever?" Then silence, except for her breathing, uneven, terrified. Finally, she whispered, "If you ever try to hurt him, I'll tell them everything." The recording cut off there. I sat frozen. The file ended, the silence humming through the laptop speakers. I played it again, trying to catch every nuance. Her tone, his. It wasn't just an argument, it was a threat. And that meant her death wasn't an ending. It was a cover-up. The next day, I went to the police station. I met Detective Hanley, the same guy who'd handled the accidental drowning. He had that weary, paper-shuffling energy of someone who'd seen too many domestic messes. "I found this," I said, sliding the flash drive across his desk. "It's my wife's voice. She was being threatened." He listened, eyebrows tightening halfway through. When it ended, he leaned back in his chair. "You said the man's name was Ethan what?" "I don't know his last name," I said. "He was married, part of her grief support group." Hanley scribbled something down. "You have a contact list from that group?" "I can get it," I said. He nodded. "Do that. And don't reach out to him yourself. If this is what it sounds like, we'll need to bring him in." For the first time since she died, I felt something that wasn't numbness. It was purpose. That night, I went through Claire's old emails, looking for any trace of Ethan. The group's coordinator had sent out a few newsletters over the years, each with a list of participants. I found one from 2022. There it was, Ethan Porter. A quick search gave me his address. A quiet suburb 15 miles north. Married, one daughter. On paper, an ordinary man. But the more I read, the worse it looked. He worked for a consulting firm that had recently been investigated for financial fraud. He'd been placed on temporary leave, the kind of man who needed control somewhere in his life, even if it wasn't at work. 2 days later, Detective Hanley called. "We spoke with him," he said. "He confirmed the relationship, but claims it ended months before her death." "Did you play the recording I asked. "Yes. He says it was taken out of context. Claims she was emotional, that he was trying to calm her down." I gripped the phone tighter. "And you believe that?" Hanley sighed. "Look, we can't prove intent without evidence of coercion or violence. The recording helps, but not enough to file charges. If we find something linking him to the scene, we'll reopen the case." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked like a reminder. I kept replaying the audio in my head. His voice, the way it shifted from pleading to angry, from fragile to cruel. By dawn, I was sitting in the car outside his house. It was a neat, white two-story with trimmed hedges and a mailbox that said Porter in block letters. Through the window, I could see movement. Him, pacing, talking on the phone. I couldn't hear the words, but his tone had that same clipped control. Part of me wanted to storm up to the door and end it right there. But another part, the one that had lived beside Claire's guilt long enough, knew that revenge wouldn't bring peace. I started the car, drove away. But I didn't go home. I went to the lake. It was colder now, the first hints of November cutting through the air. The water looked darker, thicker somehow, like it remembered what it had taken. I walked to the dock, flashlight in hand. The police had cleared the area weeks ago, but the yellow tape still clung to a few posts. I crouched down, running my hand along the wood. Something caught the light. Small, metallic, wedged between two planks. I pried it loose. A key. Attached to it was a tag. Birchwood 214. The same room from that hotel receipt months ago. By the next morning, I was standing in the lobby of the Birchwood Inn. The clerk, a tired-looking man in his 50s, recognized the tag immediately. Room 214? That's one of our older ones, he said. Why do you ask? I showed him the key. My wife stayed here a few months ago. I just found this near a lake where she died. His face shifted slightly. I remember her, he said. She wasn't alone. Was the man's name Ethan Porter? He hesitated, then nodded. Yes. They checked in twice. Last time was early September. He looked angry, I'd say. She left before dawn. He stayed until checkout. Do you have security footage? He frowned. We delete after 30 days. Sorry. Any chance they left something behind? He thought for a moment, then disappeared into the back room. When he returned, he was holding a small, sealed envelope. This was found under the nightstand after their last visit. I kept it in lost and found. No name. He handed it to me. Inside was a single photograph. Claire, standing by the lake, smiling faintly. Ethan's arm around her shoulders. But what chilled me wasn't the pose. It was what was written on the back, in Claire's handwriting. If he shows this to you, it means he never stopped. I drove straight to the station. Hanley looked at the photo, then at me. Where did you get this? Birchwood Inn. It proves he was still contacting her. He nodded slowly. All right, we'll bring him in again. But that night, before they could, Ethan Porter disappeared. His wife reported him missing the next morning. His phone was off, his car gone. And just like that, the man who'd haunted every page of Claire's journals became a ghost himself. Days turned into weeks. Thanksgiving passed without notice. I barely left the house. Sometimes I'd find myself talking to her photograph, asking questions that never got answers. Then, one morning, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small notebook, the same kind she used to write in. My name was written on the first page. Nathan. I needed you to have the truth before it gets buried. My hand shook as I turned the page. He told me he'd made copies of everything. The recordings, the letters. Said if I ever left, he'd send them to you. Said he wanted you to feel what he felt. I think he meant to destroy both of us. If you're reading this, and something happens to me, don't believe it was an accident. The last entry ended with a line that made my throat close up. He said, "Real love doesn't end. It only moves underground." I think that's what scares me most. I took the notebook straight to Hanley. He read it twice, jaw tightening. "This changes things, Siban," he said. "If he threatened her, we have grounds for a homicide investigation." A week later, divers returned to the lake, this time focusing on deeper areas near the old inlet. And what they found confirmed everything. A weighted phone wrapped in plastic. Inside the case, text messages between Claire and Ethan. The last one from him. Sent the night she died. Meet me there. One last time. No more pretending. They issued a warrant, but Ethan was still missing. His car was later found abandoned near the Hudson, driver's door open, keys still inside. Some said he ran, others said he jumped. I don't know which version I believe, maybe both. Because in the end, they were two sides of the same story. People running from themselves until there's nowhere left to go. Now it's been 3 months. The house is quieter than ever. I still talk to her sometimes in the mornings while watering the plants. The philodendron's growing again, new leaves curling toward the window. I keep her last journal locked in a drawer, not to hide it, but to remind myself that love isn't proof of goodness. It's proof of capacity. The capacity to care, to wound, to forgive, to destroy. Sometimes I replay that recording, not because I need to hear her voice, but because I want to remember the strength it took for her to say no when everything in her life was built on yes. And every time I do, I hear that last line again. I didn't mean for it to become real. I think she meant that once something becomes real, there's no taking it back. But I'm not done. Not yet. Because 2 nights ago, I got a message from an unknown number. You think it's over? Check the plant. I walked into the kitchen, heart hammering. The same philodendron sat by the window, its soil dark from this morning's watering. I dug into it carefully, fingers trembling. And there, buried just beneath the roots, was another envelope. Inside, another flash drive labeled Reel 2.